Hey guys, I'm going to be making a video on how to basically make a ZBrush down to multi-res workflow. So basically skipping a whole bunch of problems that you can have with ZBrush and having to fit UVs onto basically a UV to mesh and then subdivide that said mesh and sculpt on top of it. This one is completely different, where you grabbed a normal mesh and you basically subdivide a facsimile, it's like a UV mesh underneath, and then you fit it to it. So in this case, I've got this glass snakes that I sculpted up in ZBrush, although I'm pretty sure this version was done inside Blender. As you can see on this mesh, we actually have quite a lot of vertices, so that's because ZBrush typically spits out a ton, and if you zoom in quite close, you can see that they're all quite dense, quite close to each other. This mesh has already been pre-UV due to the fact that I have gone and messed with the mesh to make it look like it's being ripped straight out of ZBrush. So for this mesh here, basically I've used quad remesher and I've gone over it with it. So I would typically suggest do a manual retopologization, but for the sake of this, quad remesher was more than good enough, and I ended up UVing it after quad remesher had gone through it. So basically you want to keep your low and your high perfectly on top of each other. So the thing is that you will have to make sure that they are perfectly on top of each other, because you will get problems with them. Anyway, that's stuff that I'll describe later. Anyway, so here's the UV'd mesh. As you can see, you got your individual islands, and this is just a regular texture that I already baked out beforehand, just to make sure I can prove that this will work properly. And as you can see, all the islands are good enough. I used Blender's auto packing, and that's why it's not perfect, but pretty damn good. So anyway, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide the high poly just so that we can use it later inside the multi-res. And I'm just going to go up into my outliner and I'm going to select it and hide it. Then we're going to add a multi-res onto the lower poly version. So pop this down here. But no, we're not going to touch subdivide or anything like this yet. What we're going to do instead is we're going to close this up so it's out of the way. And then we're going to add a modifier called the shrink wrap modifier. Once you've added the shrink wrap modifier, I want you to put the eyedropper onto your high poly version of the mesh, and what it's going to do is try and force it to conform to the shape of the high poly. But as you can currently see, there is actually no detail being brought on due to the fact that the meshes are, there's no detail to be subdivision and then to be applied onto it. So what we're going to do now is we're actually just going to raise the subdivision count by clicking on subdivide inside of the multi-res. And with every click, you're going to see that it's going to slowly but surely take on the detail of the high poly mesh. So now that we're done with the shrink wrap modifier, we're going to hit apply because it's already traveled, kept all the detail over, and you can see all the scales and all the bumps and that sort of thing are all being kept on here. So basically, what it's doing is it's applying its shrink wrap to the very top layer of the multi-res. And while doing all this, it's also maintaining all of its own UVs. And in general, yeah, it's pretty nuts how you can actually just get all this detail directly down onto it. So with fourth divisions, you can go higher if you really want, but here we're going to apply it. So now that we've applied the modifiers, you can see as we roll the subdivision levels up and down, you can see that it's applied the subdivision so the shrink wrap all the way up and down the entire stack. So this is incredibly good if you want to just, keep performant in some scenes. You can lower your multi-res, like on a sculpt person or something similar. You could have incredibly detailed face, but then you can just move in and out of your multi-res basically during animating or something similar like that. So basically a really easy way of simplifying your mesh. So next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving over to figuring out how to use the bake. So first set your render samples down to 10, just because it doesn't need any more samples than that, and it will bake with no noise and all that sort of thing. Next thing you want to make sure is that you have ticked multi-res and bake for multi-res, sorry, and it will give you two options, and displacement and normal being them inside that box just below it. So the first one that we're going to mess around with is going to be displacement. So this is basically going to be a way of making a subdivided mesh and then using a displacement map to tell that mesh how to be distorted, so it will keep the detail while not having to actually use the multi-res modifier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new material. I already had one on here beforehand. and yeah, basically just going to name it just snake material or whatever. Next thing we're going to do is basically just get rid of all my other stuff that's inside my scene, because this is just a project I've used for a few other things as well. So we have our multi-res still, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add an image texture. So add that image texture in, click it down real quick, we're going to have press new, name it to, snake displacement or whatever you want, so whatever your mesh's name is with displacement added onto the end. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to raise the resolution up so the displacement map is viewable, so we're going to move to a 4K image. Next thing, just leave it as black, that's more than fine, and yeah, everything else on here should be good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that when we create this image, that the image doesn't actually delete itself. So Blender's got basically a cleanup feature where it stops any sort of like loose images and all that sort of thing, and it just deletes them. So here is this black map, so there's two ways doing it. So there's saving it, and then there's creating a fake user, which is this little button here. But in general, if you're going to do this, do both of it. So go up to your little burger menu up the top left of your image viewer, go down to your save, and just find whatever file, probably just make a new file. Just going to name it snake whatever, so snake model. And then we're going to use this as our location to save. We've got all of our names across here, and we're going to move it up to a 16-bit with a 0% compression. Compression honestly doesn't matter too much for here. PNGs compress pretty well after all. So anyway, so we're done here. Let's go and save our image. Save. And now we've got our image texture here. And wait for this to save for a bit, because she's not the quickest sometimes. Anyway. So this is our black image, and now that's what we're going to be baking to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to our multi-res and set the number to 0. So this is very important. Make sure to set this number to 0, otherwise the bake will not work. So now scroll down in your render settings tab down to your bake menu, and you're going to make sure you have displacement selected, and then I want you to click on the bake button. So make sure you have your image texture selected while this is happening, and you can see that they're baked down. And these are great looking textures, and yeah. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be just turning off the viewport for multi-res, just so we can see what the displacement looks like, and we're going to add a sub-div modifier in. So probably raise this level up to the same as what the multi-res is, which is 4, and it might take a second depending on how lag your scene is. But anyway, so now we're going to plug in our texture into the displacement. So right in displacement, put it into the height. Then we're going to drag the pin out from the displacement into the displacement of the material output. From this part on, your material will not be visible straight away. So there's good reason for this. Basically, what it is that your material will not be viewable because of a material setting that is under the actual parameters for the setting. I'll show that in a second. So in mine, I accidentally just deleted my own image texture because I did not save the textures properly. This is why it's very important to make sure that your textures are both saved and have the users faked to make sure the Blender does not do cleanup and delete. Alright, let's pretend like I didn't accidentally just crash my thingy by running subdivision multi-res at the same time. But anyway, let's turn off the subdivision, turn back on the multi-res, set it to 0. Let's go back to our baking tab, go down to the select the snake displacement, and then go back to bake. Let's rebake that displacement. So the problem here is that we didn't A, fake the user, and B, we need to save the image again. So let's save everything. While this struggles, I'm going to hit save, and then just resave the image to make sure that there is no chance that image can randomly get deleted from Blender's cleanup. So the reason I was having a problem with the displacement and the reason that there was nothing being shown was because that image was just automatically deleted. So let's go scale back to 1. As you can probably tell, that's not a very good looking mesh. So we're going to then click off our multi-res, click back on our subdivision, then we want to lower the scale. And put it roughly here. So the mid-level should be around 0.5. That's probably the most accurate to what it was. And then you can play with this strength value as much as you want to try and get, roughly the spots that you're after. But of course, yeah, you've got your jaggies, there will be a little bit of aliasing, but that's just from resolution of the texture and of course of the baking. So you can always subdivide more, or you can always use a higher resolution displacement, and yeah, that's an easy way of fixing it. So now that you're done with your displacement, you want to get to normals. So this is in case you wanted to do a height or even lower and not use displacement as your method. So the next thing what we're going to do is we're going to unplug the displacement, turn back on the oh god damn it, get rid of the subdivision as quickly as possible before your thing crashes. Click on your multi-res, go back into here and press 4. So now you're back to your original mesh. Now we want to make a new material, so I'm just going to Control D this, exit the material, new. We're going to call this snake normal. We're going to copy most of the settings of the other texture, so we're just going to do 4. That is not what I told you to do. It's called 4096 for a 4K image. 4096. We're going to go the same as everything, blank, blah 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 blah. New image. Now we're going to go straight into this black picture and immediately save it, just to not get any problems. Now, if you don't save it, the image texture might completely break to the point where it's actually unusable. So there is a reason why we do this straight away. So PNG, blah blah blah, 0% compression, 16 color depth, save. As you can tell, it's a black image, so it's not exactly a normal. So let's fix that. Wait for this image to save. There we go. I'm going to fake its user to make sure it's saved. Now we're going to try and do a bake down. So multi-res set back to 0. Go back to your bake normals, and then make sure you have that bake set to bake from multi-res. Now while selecting this image, you want to click your bake, and now you have all that yummy normal detail directly on here. That's what you'll want to see. Now this mesh has been optimized before, that's the reason why you can't see it. But if your multi-res has like a flat yellowy yuckiness on these edges of any edges, that's caused by it being outside of the multi-reg's cage. So to fix that, I would suggest smoothing the mesh in that area just to make sure it's a little bit closer. Or you can go around and try and reduce the amount of... Anyway, it's a bunch of screw around, but just make sure that your two meshes are as close to each other as humanly possible. So retopoing over the other one is typically the better idea to get that detail. Now, I've got this snake normal now. I'm going to save this image immediately. So I make sure that, there's no chance that it's going to accidentally get cleaned up by Blender. Saved image. Now, we're going to go down to your color space, and like with all normals, you need to set them to non-color, because Blender does not use color inside its it uses vectors instead. We're going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add in a normal map. Then you're going to plug your color into the color slot of the normal map. You're going to plug the normal into the normal of your shader, and as you can see, you've got your normal detail. So whether or it depends on if you want to change the silhouette of the model, as well as whether or not you want to use multi-res's displacement or not. But yeah, so this is completely independent of the multi-res. So as you can see, because I've switched it off from the real time, this is completely independent. So absolutely nothing to do with the subdivision. Now, the reasons why we don't actually stick displacement and the normals together is that you get some funkiness, where it's basically getting multiplied on top of each other. So you'll get like darker spots that will occur, and while technically it looks like it's closer to what the mesh was, that's only because we're in material preview. And the moment that you use something like glass or like a material that's very dependent on its shader, it will start to just not look great, and you'll get darkening and stuff. In this case, because the normal is actually a fairly clean normal, as you can see, it's a very smooth and down one. Oh, actually, no, it's not being affected properly because the subdivision. Let's add 4 levels. And let's see how it goes. Yeah, see, it doesn't look right. No matter what you do, it will just not look right. So I would say always use one over the other. And if you're making like a game asset, you would use normals. If you're making a render, you'd use displacement, just because it's easier and looks nicer. So let's get rid of that subdivision. And yeah, so you're done. Having baked out maps, you can ship this out into, just say, Maya. You can ship this out into Unreal or whatever, and you can always just apply the maps over it. And obviously, because you've saved the two maps, you can easily just bring them in and whatever. And just for this, just to make a nice looking render, I'm going to quickly just add some transmission and lower the roughness, and you have these really cool glass snakes.